Hello and welcome to the Damp Show with me, Damp Sam. Today's episode is going to be called What Kind of Damp is Affecting My Home? And just before we start, this is in conjunction with my Facebook group, Damp Sam, Why is My House Damp, Damp Sam? So if you look for that group online, you can join it, you can add your photos, add your videos, and we'll comment on it and we'll see if we can get to the bottom of what issues you've got. Find out what type of damp is affecting your home so you can eradicate the problem without spending more than you need to. I don't really understand that. You know what I mean? You're going to spend more than you need to if you don't get somebody who's trustworthy, competent, qualified to diagnose your issue. So always make sure you get somebody competent, qualified to diagnose it, else you could end up spending more than you should. Rising damp, penetrating damp, and condensation are the three most common types of damp for residential properties. Again, I disagree. Rising damp is not the most common form of damp. Bridging issues is more common than rising damp. I've found in all the time that I've been in this industry, in the preservation industry, which is a long time. So I would take out rising damp and I'd put bridging issues in there. And that's what I find is a lot of problem. A lot of properties have already got a damp proof course in. So if it's a new build, properties after 1920, 1919, we regard as being modern type, and we say that these have probably been built with a damp proof course and a cavity in. Some haven't, but some have. And a lot have had a retrofit to DPC added as well. So if there's a breach, it's either going to be a bridging issue. It's not going to be the whole ground floor. It's going to be a small part of that DPC that's either broke down, being bridged. So take that with a pinch of salt. Condensation is the most common kind of damp. It is caused by moist, warm air condensing on cool walls, particularly in rooms that naturally generate a lot of moisture, such as kitchens and bathrooms. It's mainly, but not always, a winter problem, as walls tend to be colder than the air inside. So when they say it's particularly kitchens and bathrooms, again, that's wrong. Air circulates throughout a property, so you can have humid air in your cellar, and that humid air will rise up through the building on warmer air currents, because warm air rises, and it'll go to the top of the building. It'll go to all different rooms. And the example that I give on this point is, if you burnt some toast in a toaster in kitchen, how long do you think it'll take before you could smell that burnt toast? I'm telling you, it's seconds. You know, if you burn something down there, it's seconds, but you can smell it. You smell it straight away. Condensation can be exacerbated by central heating that gets very warm and then cools down again, as this creates warm, damp air that can then condense, causing condensation. It does create warm air, but basically you've got air molecules, and let's say air molecule is round like a football. So when it's cool, it's round like a tennis ball, and when the air warms up, it can expand to the size of a football. So you imagine like a small ball expanding to a large ball, and you imagine your small ball taking in water, so that fills with water, and as it gets bigger, it's filling with water. So warmer air has larger air molecules because they expand. So in theory and in practice, they can hold more moisture. But what happens is when the heating goes off and this football's full of water, and then these start to shrink and go back to a smaller size, the water that's in them, they can't hold it, so it condenses out mainly onto colder surfaces. A lack of ventilation can also make the problem worse. This can be particularly apparent in older homes, which were designed to be naturally breathable and allow damp air to evaporate outside of the house. The removal of existing chimneys and energy-saving measures, such as fitting airtight double glazing, can reduce ventilation in old homes and create a condensation problem. Yeah. Symptoms of condensation: water droplets on windows or walls, the appearance of dark mold, particularly on glass and around windows, an unpleasant mouldy smell. If left untreated, condensation can damage paint and plaster and cause window frames to decay. So when you see it form, you should wipe it away with a cloth. If you'd rather use less elbow grease, some gadgets claim to be able to help with condensation and leave your windows streak-free. Find out what happens when we tried the Karcher window vac. So there's a link that you can click on and you can see them using a Karcher window vac. I'm just looking at that picture because it looks a bit blurred compared with the top one, but I'll soldier on. A lack of ventilation is the problem. There are steps you can take to improve things. Making use of extractor fans and dehumidifiers can help to reduce how much moisture is in the air in the first place. Find out how to buy the best dehumidifier for your home, and there's a link here. But you can have a look. But as I said before, or I've said on previous podcasts, try to avoid buying a dehumidifier, especially with the costs of energy at the moment, because they do use a hell of a lot of electricity, a dehumidifier, and you'll be forever emptying it. And if you had perfect conditions in your property and you put a dehumidifier on, you'd still be emptying it because people produce moisture. So there's always moisture in your property. So make sure you get adequate ventilation. And we've spoke about that before. So we've said continuously running low carbon extractor fans, 150mm for a kitchen, 100mm for a bathroom, and they're your basics. They're the things that you've got to have in your property. You should have in your property as standard. If your home is suffering from condensation, take a look at our in-depth expert advice on the best ways of dealing with condensation. There's another link to another issue. Rising damp is caused by groundwater moving up through a wall or floor. It's natural for walls and floors to allow a little water in, but it's usually stopped from causing damage by a barrier called a damp-proof course. A damp-proof membrane, see image below, you can't see it, but it's like a plan. A damp-proof course is a waterproof horizontal strip, usually made of plastic or bitumen or slate, bitumen felt, built into the wall at a height of at least 15 centimetres, 150 millimetres above the ground level. Yep, correct. A damp-proof membrane is a sheet of material that is impervious to water, which is laid underneath the floor. This should be connected to the damp-proof course so that the house is effectively sealed and protected from groundwater. Now, You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to have that running in. No, they can be separate. You don't have to have it running in unless it's like a basement and it's part of a waterproofing system. No, I'm just looking at this plan. So no, newer houses will have both, as they are a requirement of building regulations, Part C for England and Wales. Older buildings, particularly those built before regulations came into force in 1875, I might have got that wrong, it's 1919, may not, and they may have worn or been damaged over time. If this is the case, your walls or floors may suffer from rising damp. Rising damp can also happen when there is a lack of drainage or the level of the ground outside your home is higher than your damp-proof course, allowing water to get above it. So this again is a bridging issue, and it's not rising damp. That's lateral damp. If you've got a higher ground level on the outside than the inside, and it's above your damp course, it's bridging it. So it's a bridging issue, and you've got lateral dampness coming through as well. So that's a different type of damp. Still could get ground salts because it's from the ground, water from the ground. So yeah, a bit of grey area there. Symptoms of rising damp: damaged skirting boards or plaster. Yep. Peeling paint and wallpaper, often with wet patches. Kinda, yeah, I'll take that. A white powder-like substance on the wall, left by soluble salts dissolved in the water. Yep, ground salts dissolve in the water, rise up and then evaporate out of the wall, leaving the salts on the surface of the plaster. Tide marks rising up the wall. Yep. If the problem is coming from the floor, you may notice floor coverings lifting. Yeah, if there's no DP, that's if there's no damp-proof membrane underneath your floor, you could get issues with floor coverings getting wet and floor coverings lifting, I suppose. But again, you'd need to get an expert to look at it because it could be other issues as well. Read our guide to find out how to treat issues with rising damp and whether you need to call a professional to deal with it. You need to call a professional to deal with it no matter what. Get somebody to have a look at it who knows what they're on with. Qualified professional, qualified surveyor, PCA qualified surveyor. If you do, our damp proofing costs page will give you an idea of how much you need to spend. I'll be judge of that, and I don't think they'll be right. So yeah, I'm going to have a look at that later. I might do a podcast on that next week. Penetrating damp is water caused by water leaking through the walls. This type of damp may expand across your walls or ceiling, but this will move horizontally rather than travelling up the walls, as is the case with rising damp. Penetrating damp is usually caused by structural problems in a building such as faulty guttering and or roofing, or cracks in the walls which let in water, and when walls and roofs are soaked with water during heavy rainfall, it can also be caused by internal leaks such as leaky pipes underneath the sink and bath. If it's leaky pipes inside, I wouldn't class that as penetrating damp. If it's on outside and you've got continuous water running against the surface, it's a solid wall, or there's a bridge in a cavity and it's come across cavity, that is penetrating damp. If it's behind the bath, I'd just say that's just classed as pipes leaks. Symptoms of penetrating damp: damp patches on walls or ceilings which may darken when it rains. Now you know about penetrating damp. Is it damp proofing costs? They all keep putting you through to damp proofing costs. Did you find this useful? Yeah. So dealing with damp, and they've got it. It's not a bad page, this. So if you type damp into Google, just DAMP, and then look for articles, you'll see the Which article, and you click on that, you can read that. But they've got bits that you can kind of click off onto. So they've got 4 at bottom: how to get rid of damp, how to stop condensation, how much does damp repairs cost. I'll have a look at it now. Well, I'm here. Hang on, damp proofing costs. How much does damp repairs cost? Go on, I'll click that one. So you get a bonus here. I'm gonna have a quick read of this and have a look at this. How much does it cost to repair damp? This is from the Which article. It's not me saying it. Don't be holding me to account on this. Stop damp in its tracks. Discover the typical costs of damp treatment and damp proofing. Let me clear my throat for this. Repairing a damp problem can be expensive. It can be expensive if you don't get it right first time. Here we look at typical damp treatment and damp proofing costs, plus expert advice to make sure you don't end up spending more than you need to. Damp proofing costs can run into the thousands of pounds. Yep, they can, and can be very disruptive, as the most extreme works significantly affects your home's structure. I think they're on about dry rot and wet rot on structural timbers. So if it's been left, that is when you can start adding up your costs, and it can go into thousands, tens of thousands as well. Make sure you're prepared for the potential costs, and don't overpay for work by reading our guide below. So I'm gonna read this for you and give you some value, and I'll tell you my comments on it. How much does damp proofing cost? We've worked with the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, RICS, who, by the way, are not damp proofing experts. If they'd have gone to the PCA, if they'd have said PCA, I'd have said yeah. But there's a reason why RICS surveyors have to recommend that a qualified PCA specialist surveyor has to do a damp survey if they find damp issues on one of their surveys. There's a reason for that. That's because the chartered surveyors are not they're not qualified to make to write reports on damp issues, because if they got took to court, which a couple have been, they'll get absolutely hammered because they're not qualified. So take this with a pinch of salt. The Chartered Surveyors, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, RICS, which publishes average building works and repair costs to bring you the average cost for a range of different damp treatments. Again, I'll tell you, there's no average cost. Every company is different, and every company will charge different. Every company is different sizes, and they will charge different. They'll charge different for if they're busy, if they're not busy. There's a whole host of reasons why, they'll have a base rate, and then it can be out above that. From repairing a damp-proof course with silicone to laying an entire new damp-proof membrane. So nobody uses silicone to inject into walls anymore. It just don't work. It's a siloxane cream. So I don't know when this was first made, but that's just wrong. Nobody puts silicone in a DPC. To give realistic idea of how much various treatments might cost, We've provided prices for terraced, semi and detached houses, as well as the cost for treating just one wall or one area. I'm intrigued now. I can't wait to get further down. Which members can log on and see these prices in the table, as well as findings from our damp investigations. Oh, they're qualified, are they? Which revealed bad practice from a number of specialist damp proofing companies. And I've got a story from this, so I'm not going to name any names, but when I was joining PCA, I had to have an assessment. And the person that came up, who knows who he is, who was sat with me, and his phone was just going, his phone was just red hot, and he had to keep nipping out and taking calls. And what he told me was, this had just been breaking, this story, for which, and it were a couple of member companies that they'd set up in a house and filmed them, getting diagnosis wrong. And I've not watched it. I'm gonna have to try, and I might have to watch this after. But he'd got to deal with all this fallout from these companies that, and just remember that these are big companies, big damp proofing national companies, and these companies have their own training, and they have their own systems in place, but the people that work for them, even though they've been on courses, they are human, and some of them's got bad practice. Some companies have been thrown out at PCA. If PCA find out that any companies are not up to standard, this is why we're audited all the time, then they'll be asked to leave. They'll get warnings, and then they get asked to leave, as was one last year for bad practice. I'm not naming any names. You can look it up online. You'll find out who it is. Problem. The existing damp-proof course is below ground level. Excavate as much soil as needed to ensure the ground level is at least 15 centimetres, 150 mil below the damp-proof course. The costs below are for treatment that's minimum width for 1 metre from the wall. Now, you can do that. You can lower ground levels if there's no. What tends to happen is, over time, if it's a 120-year-old house, over time ground levels have been raised and raised and raised. But a lot of time they'll have put pipework in as well, cables and things like that. So if you do lower it, you might have to reroute some of these drains, things like that. You know what I mean? And that's where your expense will come in. So systems have been invented and developed so that you don't have to lower ground levels. So it makes it cheaper for the householder. And this is why you need a qualified surveyor to look at it, because they'll probably know a lot of systems. Work needed. So it evacuates. Right, so I'm looking at these. Show full table. There's no thingies on them. They've got like locks on them. I'll show you. If you see there, they've got locks on this table, and I'm tipping you've got to be a member to access these prices. Show full table. Yeah, so there's no prices at all on any of them, all the way down. Yeah, so you've got to be a witch member to access these tables. So they're not daft. They want you to sign up. I'll just read what other bits are. So let's have a look. So one of the things is evacuate soil only, one wall. Terraced house, semi-detached, and I'm tipping where these locks are, there will be a price. So you have to become a member, a witch, to find out what prices they've put in, which would be interesting. It'd be interesting to know what prices they are. Next one is problem walls are damp at low level because the damp proof course is damaged or non-existent. So then you've got treatment. Solution: create a damp barrier with silicon. You don't silicon. This must have been wrote in 70s or 80s or even 90s, because since 2000, when Safeguard invented Dry Zone cream, which is a siloxane based cream, they people just don't use it. You don't have a silicon based thing. Silicon, what is the carrier that it's used for to get into the wall? So they used silicon. They used to put it in under high pressure. But even that, towards end of its lifespan, they phased it out, and they were using water as a carrier. So you had I can't say a word. Aqueous or whatever. I think it's aqueous. So aqua-based stuff, so water-based carriers, and that took your damp-proofing chemicals into the wall under high pressure and a low pressure as well. And then now you use siloxane creams, which is put in with an applicator, which is a lot easier, and it don't go into brick, it goes into joints, like I've explained on previous podcasts. To add a new damp proof course, DPC, 2 courses of brickwork will be cut out and a bitumen coated Hessian damp proof course inserted. Oh my god, this is from Dark Ages. Then the brickwork will be made good, including the mortar pointing, so that it looks like it did before. I'm going to tell you now, don't go onto this site, because these are from like 80s and late 70s and 80s. This guy who taught me, he had a damp company in London, and he adapted. This is how crude it was. He adapted a chainsaw to do this system. So there's a way where you can cut out bricks, and you do it in such a manner, a bit similar to if you're underpinning. So you do it a metre at a time, on all round. And I've seen properties where they've done it, and this is an expensive method to do. So you cut these bricks out, and he adapted a chainsaw, so he could cut. There's actually a drill. I'm trying to think what they call it. They have it at builders merchants. It's got 2 blades, but this was a chainsaw. And he was telling us when he adapted it, it was just dangerous as hell. And he used to saw these bricks out. And he says it worked. He used to saw it out quickly, so he could take these bricks out. And then they used to put a new damp-proof course in. So now you could put a plastic one in, I suppose, overlap it, but it's still going to, wherever it overlaps, it's still going to be vulnerable. So it can be done that way. Don't do it that way. There's a reason why these new methods have been developed, to make it easier and to make it cheaper. So yeah, so this is just now witch living in dark ages. So I'll go on to the next one. Hang on. So insert new damp proof course on one. Go on to the next. The problem: damp is penetrating a cavity wall. If it's penetrating a cavity wall, there's something in the cavity wall that's bridging it. And if it's modern day stuff, it'll be older type of the insulation, the cavity wall insulation. It's like white, and you can squeeze it with your hand. When you squeeze it with your hand, it goes into like a knot. So that's the older type. I don't know what they call it. And that will get wet. But it gets wet if from penetrating damp, and it gets wet from water vapour going through fabric. That'll wet it as well. But also if you've had mucky brickies and building it, and all shit's been going into cavity, you'll get mortar on wall ties. You get all build up mortar in bottom if it's a mucky bricky, and they can. And sometimes they drop bits of brick down there as well, so that can block a cavity and bridge a cavity, but what they've said is penetrating damp. Well, there's only a couple of things. So clear out cavities, isolate areas less than 3 meters above ground level. So you can clear cavities out, and this, if you've got time, you can cut bricks out, and then you can clear a cavity out. It is a big problem with cavities being bridged from debris and stuff that's fallen down from roof, and when they've changed roofs and different maintenance. So if you've got time, you can do that. But there's systems that you can put on wall, and it won't even matter if you did have a bridge cavity. So express damp proofing system, when you stick board on, it's held off at wall. So yeah. So there's ways of doing stuff, and if you're guaranteeing it and you know what you're doing, then that's your issue. But if it's your own house, you could, you know what I mean. If you've got an endoscope knocking around, drill an hole, stick your endoscope in, have a look, see if your cavity's filled, and if it's filled, cut a brick out and empty it, and that might save you putting a damp-proof course in. Penetrating damp walls at different heights around windows and doors and ceiling heights. The solution: insert a new damp-proof course in the walls at different levels to create a barrier to damp. Options include a cavity tray used to stop water from the outer wall reaching the inner. Now, new properties should have a cavity tray in anyway over windows and stuff. Cost of inserting a cavity tray or damp-proof barrier includes removing bricks, replacing them, and making them match the existing brickwork. Yeah, you need an endoscope. So all this work, and so you're going to have a survey done anyway. So you need to drill a hole, put your endoscope in, and you'll be able to see whether these cavity trays are torn or not working. So you can get issues with them. But you're looking at an invasive survey, which is going to cost more than a visual survey. So there's no prices on here, so I think I'll come back to this. I might miss a member and just have a look at these prices, but there's no point in going on here because you're not going to be able to see any prices. Yeah, so we're going to wrap it up here. So if you need to get in contact with me, you just email me, simon@thedampshow.co.uk. If you want to email me at AllDry, it's dampsam@alldrydampproofing.com. Joint Facebook group, which is Damp Sam. Why is my property damp? Damp Sam. Search for that on Facebook. Put your videos on. Put your pictures on. We'll comment. We'll point you in the right direction. You might get on WhatsApp group, and I should listen out for in future soon on YouTube. We might have a members area, so you're gonna have more access to me. So we'll have different levels of membership, and what you can do is you can come on there. You get there's different. I'll do another video that tells you all benefits anyway. But there's different levels. It's something like for price of a cup of coffee, you've got access to me, and you've got access to an expert. So yeah, that's Damp Sam. I'm going to sign off now, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope you've enjoyed it. So give us a like and send this video to somebody else if you think that they might get some value from it. See you later. Bye bye now.